All right, good afternoon and welcome to our channel. Today, I'd like to discuss Section 8 portability and kind of explain the program as a whole. And also, this will be a complete moving guide for you as well, where we get into a little bit of portability and porting and moving to different counties or states. And so you're able to exercise your rights within the Section 8 program. But before I get started, let me do a few introductions. I'm going to switch over screens real quick. Let's see here. I'm going to change out the photo a little bit. This always takes me a minute. Sorry about that, guys. And there's me to the right, my talking head, of course. And then for those with their learning disabilities or those that can't keep pace with the conversation, I'm going to bring up notes in the video with us. And let's see if I add that in real quick. Here we go. And last but not least, if you look at the top of the screen, you'll see the phone number to my office, the website address, as well as email. That's Our office is by appointment for those that are having a difficult time navigating the system or need assistance with portability and understanding how to pre-plan your trip or have other related problems with that or other issues related to Section 8 housing and federal programs. For those that don't know, I practice at the federal level for nearly 26 years, started about 22,000 people, and well, let's just say it's a good alternative as a private solution if you need further assistance beyond the free. Okay. So moving on here, portability explained. And so first up, portability allows a family with a tenant-based housing choice voucher or any housing choice voucher to move outside the jurisdiction. And jurisdiction usually means that housing authorities are located centrally in your county. When you exit that county, then there's a high potential that you will have to initiate portability and determine billing and absorbing, of course. Now, keep in mind, in some cases, there may be multiple counties. One housing authority may actually be over as many as 13 different counties, depending on how rural you are and where you're at. Okay. So this may include to another city, county, state, provided the housing authority with a tenant-based HCV program serves that designation or any housing choice voucher program that is permissible. Portability generally does not mean joining and receiving the housing authority's wait list again. The receiving authority administers the transfer of a voucher under portability procedures, which can be found at Title 24 CFR 982.353 and Title 24 CFR 982.3.55. I'm going to link that up. And for those that don't know, we will be putting up the notes in both the description as well as the comment section as to completion along with links. Okay. So the two housing authorities, initial PHA, the housing authority that issued or currently controls your voucher, and then of course where you're moving is going to be the receiving PHA, the housing authority serving your area where your family wants to move, or just you. Okay, the initial PHA determines whether the family is eligible to move, selects or confirms the receiving PHA, sends the portability documents, and determines whether financial arrangement can be approved. That's not always the case. That's more like the early 2000s. These days, housing authorities are quite lazy in that respect. So there often is better for you to go and actually reach out to the receiving PHA and then find out whether or not they'd be billing absorbing, can accept your case on your own merits. Okay. I also find that notifying your current housing authority, you should not do that until you have everything well planned, because what'll happen is they'll start that process before you're ready and then you'll end up in a jam. Okay. So moving on, how portability process works. Well, the current participants generally have the portability rights, but the move must comply with the lease and program rules and the initial PHA's moving policies. The PHA may have policies that prohibit moves during the initial lease term, limiting families to assist one moving duration during a 12-month period. That's because back in the 80s, people tried to use vouchers as a vacation plan. They would move to different areas of the country depending on weather, season, or vacationing, and therefore it was abuse of the program. So they're more careful. You're not going to be able to check into a property in the Bahamas and then trail back during the winter and go to Montana to enjoy some snow. Okay. Moving up from there, require the family to be in good standing and all debts and rent standards must be met. Require proper notice to the landlord, which is generally going to be a 30-day notice to vacate on your part. You don't want to really clue your landlord into anything until you actually plan everything out and are well prepared. So do not go on a Joan of Arc mission to notify both your housing authority or the landlord to the very last minute you do this. Okay, take my advice, or you will end up in a tough situation. These restrictions are subject to civil civil rights requirements and special protection under BAWA, where there may be issues where there's domestic problems, violence, and other issues related to DV. Okay, but because of how YouTube used the subject matter, I have to abbreviate a bit. So under Title 24, 982.354, you can find additional exceptions to rules and policies regarding portability if you're under imminent threat, or you reach out to my office and we can discuss what you can do to greatly expedite your case if you have a problem with that, stalking or otherwise, as long as we're able to get it approved. Number two, understanding the actual 12-month rule. You must live there for 1 year. A rule does not automatically apply for everyone. Now, I can tell you there's exceptions to that. I found a minimum 22 at least 22 exceptions to federal rules, which would allow a person to actually leave without actually meeting that 12-month rule. But the Housing Authority loves to publish lots of materials and have the whole U.S. believe that you've got to somehow meet this 12-month rule. Now, off cup, yes, but again, there are exceptions to that policy. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to move half the nation and nearly 10,000 or more clients with portability, despite them never living or even working there. Okay, so there are exceptions to that. So, anyways, it applies when the household head or a spouse was legally residing in the PHA's jurisdiction when the family originally applied. During the first 12 months after admission, that non-resident family does not have an automatic right to portability. However, the initial PHA may voluntarily approve the move earlier. And so there's that exception. Remember, it's a lot like court. You know, there's the truth and then there's the whole truth. The Housing Authority is not going to teach how to beat their system. And also, as it goes on to disclose VAWA related exceptions, it may also apply. So, see, we've already found two exceptions, though you don't know what all of them are. There are lots. A family may already be living in an initial PHA's jurisdiction when it applied and may be eligible for portability at lease up. And so we identified now a third reason in which you could actually port early, subject to the other program's requirements under Title 24, 353, subsection C. So moving on from there, given a written notice before moving, notifying both the PHA and the landlord before leaving the current unit, telling the PHA the exact city, state, county, and zip you want to move. It goes on to say, do not terminate your lease, move your belongings, or pay a non-refundable deposit, or sign a new lease until you've understood a few things, okay? And in this case, it'd be whether portability request has been approved, whether the current lease can legally end, the PHA serves the new address, whether sufficient voucher time remains, the new payment standard, subsidy, or standard, and whether the proposed rent is likely to be affordable. That's why you got to do some planning, guys. There's a lot of moving mechanisms with portability. And though, in my opinion, of all things, Section 8, portability is likely the easiest thing to do, it's still not that easy, okay? It's just easier than a whole lot of other things that are related to policies and procedures. So moving on from number 4, identifying the receiving PHA. Now, again, back in early 2000, housing authorities would actually do all this for you. They won't do it no more. So you're going to have to clock in. And so you're going to reach out to look at where you're moving, determine the county, and then, of course, at that point, you'll determine the housing authority, make contact with them, and then they can start looking at your case to see whether or not they want you to port or absorb there. Just so you know, most housing authorities the first year are going to only want to do billing. They want to see if you're going to move there successfully and whether you're going to cooperate, meet their rules there. And if everything goes right after the first year, then they will tell you to relinquish that voucher back to where you used to live, and then they will absorb you and then give you a voucher, which will not require you to wait, okay? Moving on from there, number 5, PHAs decide between billing and absorbing. The initial PHA, not the families responsible for contacting the receiving PHA to determine whether the voucher will be billed or absorbed. Again, we discussed how that's been changed. Billing, the receiving PHA administers the voucher, but the bills of the initial PHA for the Housing Authority assistance payment and eligible administration fees. Absorption is the receiving a PHA places the family into its own HCV program and pays for the assistance using its own voucher funding. So you see, it's easy to send a bill back. Nobody wants to lose their funding for their city and then have somebody trail off to another place. That's why there's billing and absorbing process to determine whether or not you're actually going to move there and then actually stay there, cooperate, of course, meet your standards under a HAP contract. Moving on from there, the receiving PHA is a statement that billing and absorbing does not in itself mean it refuses portability. It means the PHA remains financially responsible. Number 6, the initial PHA sends a portability packet. After approval, the initial PHA sends a receiving PHA, and it's called a HUD 52665 Family Portability Information. You'll see that doesn't often happen, but you can look that up. The family's most recent HUD 558, which is another form, and then supporting income and eligibility verifications, a copy of issued voucher, and other relevant documentation. Let me tell you something, guys. A lot of you may come from a state and dealing with a PHA where you presently are, and you got a lot of bells and whistles. You've got 13 living age, you've got 45 bedrooms, you have exceptions, elevators, and all this shit, right? You port that voucher somewhere else, the new housing authority may look at that and go, you know what? Uh, we're going to build the first year, but after the building, we're going to absorb you, but we're going to re-review all this extra that you got. Okay, and you may end up being unloaded on. In other words, they may not want to agree to all the stuff the last housing authority did. The reason I'm bringing that up, some of you have had vouchers for over 30 years, so you've had plenty of time to get the housing authorities year after year to agree to a whole lot of extra. Well, this will be probably the unrolling of that. Okay, not all PHAs, your bells and whistles, your accommodations and modifications don't necessarily transfer, and there are other things during state law that could affect that as well. So I'm not trying to scare you, but I think it's important that you not have too many, and you should have a simple, reasonable idea what they might accept and what they might not. Also, when portability is initiated, you understand that if you've got a $3,000 voucher in New York and you move to the Deltas in Mississippi, that they're not going to issue you a $3,000 voucher out there. You're going to be adjusted based on the Delta of Mississippi, right? And so that voucher is going to go way on down. So you need to make sure you're looking comparable markets if you don't want your voucher standard and payment to go down. Okay. So moving on from there, number 7, contact and receiving PHA immediately. I don't recommend I don't recommend that as much, but again, a lot of the context of this video is to show you what the government would tell you versus actual real experience working like I do. And I can tell you that some of the stuff I don't recommend, but because I want to be fair and reasonable, I'm going to give you government guidance. Then I'm going to correct that because I know it's a terrible idea in many cases. The family must contact the receiving PHA and follow its incoming portability procedures. Failure to complete the appointments, forms, briefings, and requested verifications may cause delay and could result in denial or termination. In other words, you'll be left paying a $200 hotel bill, have all your shit in storage, and then eventually you'll lose the voucher and become homeless. Watch yourself. Do not port till you're prepared. Don't play games. Make sure you get all your stuff done. They're not, these housing authorities are not playing. You can end up losing your voucher through this process, and then you'll just be a rent payer at a low tier hotel. Okay, so just be careful, plan your trips accordingly, and meet the conduct and rules and policies that are required. The family must properly contact the PHA and follow its income portability procedures, as I had mentioned. And then I'm also including in here HUD's moves and portability guide. Look, take that with salt, okay? In other words, use it as kind of a guide, but it's not the Holy Bible, okay? Not everything the government recommends through its own policies and procedures are always recommended for your cases. So look at that as maybe a shining light of an example of a portability guide, okay? Moving on from there, what can you change after you port? Well, portability transfers rental assistance, but it does not guarantee that every feature of the old voucher remains unchanged, as I previously mentioned. The receiving PHA generally applies its own payment standards, utility allowances, subsidy, bedroom size standards, voucher extension policies, rent reasonable procedures, inspection procedures, administrative plan, and moving to work policies. Not only that, they can change even more, right? So we did a talk about accommodations. These are not McDonald's coupons. It doesn't always transfer, okay? So bedroom size can change. The receiving PHA determine the voucher size as its own subsidy standards, and a family with a 2-bedroom voucher, an initial PHA, could receive a 1-bedroom voucher from a receiving PHA. Watch out. There are states that even consider your living room a bedroom. So while you might have had a 2-bedroom in the city of Houston, then you go move to a place like California, and then your second bedroom will be your living room. So watch out. That's why I told you, planning is really critical to this. If you don't understand the whole gratuitous process, then I would certainly reach out to my office. We do offer appointments, but again, they're not free appointments, okay? The voucher amount does not transfer dollar for dollar, as I had mentioned before. You're not going to take a New York voucher at a high price and then try to hope to walk that into somewhere like Baton Rouge, Louisiana, hoping you're going to be able to rent a mansion. It's just simply not going to work out that way. You'll end up in a shotgun house on 3rd Street for what they give you. So the 40% affordability limit, the initial occupying of the new unit, if its gross rent exceeds the applicable rate, payment standard, the family share generally cannot exceed 40% of the adjusted monthly income. If the calculated share exceeds that limit, the PHA cannot approve the tenancy unless the rent is reduced and another ballot adjustments and changes to the calculation. HUD states that PHAs must assist with rent negotiations if the family requests help. Yeah, we'll see about that. So there's one thing written and there's another that I know better than. But I'm going to link you up to HUD's Housing Search and Leasing Guidebook. Think of that as a clinical guide. It doesn't mean that it's going to serve reality perfectly. You guys are going to learn a lot of things aren't exactly what they seem. All right, voucher deadline. So the receiving PHA must issue the voucher does not expire earlier than 30 calendar days after initial PHA expiration. Let's talk about this for a minute. You take that voucher, you port it, you gas up to Lincoln, right? You're right on down to Florida. You meet up with the housing authority. They give you search time. Typically, it's going to be 30 to 60 days. Then, if you wish, you can request an extension with probably not too big a problem, bringing your search time up to 2 months or even 4 months, right? What's not really going to happen, go over very well, is you try to file for a third extension. Extensions, you can file for about three of them, okay? After the second one, you're going to find it's really difficult to get them to agree to a third one. But sometimes they'll do that for those that are disabled or possibly that have medical problems or unable to use their search time normally. All right. Search times may not exceed a grand total of 6 months combined. So all three requests may not exceed 6 months. At that point, you're considered a lost cause and you'll end up in the motel. Okay. Can portability be denied? Yes, portability requests may be denied when the family is not eligible to move under its own lease or PHA policy. The family has violated program violations. New admission is subject to a non-resident 12-month restriction with, and again, the truth, but never the whole truth. There are exceptions to that. Receiving PHA will bill the initial PHA that would increase the housing assistance costs, and the initial PHA lacks sufficient funding. That is one exception that most PHAs are weaponizing these days. Oh, so sorry, we ain't got the money, and therefore they'll deny portability. And that's especially true because this has been a difficult couple of years under the administration and lack of funding and so forth. And I've seen a lot of that lately, as whereas many prior years and decades, this was not a big problem. Moving from there, we're going to be closing this video up here. The PHA denies higher cost moves because insufficient funding may notify its local HUD office within 10 business days to make that determination. So there is some involvement by HUD. Request for every denial in writing include the specific reason, regulation, administrative plan provision, the calculation supporting any funding based denial, and available review for hearing rights and deadline to challenge the decision. So you can challenge the decision. The PHA must accurately report that to HUD. And if you feel they haven't, then you can push that through if you wish. So common portability mistakes, and I've listed some that appear to be the more prominent ones. Moving before receiving a written approval is a terrible idea, assuming the new PHA will be the same payment standard as we've explained. They're not going to be. Assuming the voucher bedroom size cannot change, and it can, because there's also other things like state and county laws that can affect rooms. Remember, California thinks your living room's a bedroom, so watch out. Signing up for a lease before the units is going through HQS and is approved. A lot of you guys want to move in your China hutch and you don't even have a housing quality inspection, therefore failed, and then the PHA will terminate you over that. Do not move in any dwelling without the approval of PHA. Okay, don't do it. Paying a deposit before checking affordability. Don't do that either. Allowing the voucher to expire during the transfer, common sense. Sending paperwork without retaining a delivery confirmation. Don't be foolish, okay? Anytime you deal with a housing authority, make sure you've got a material record by email or you're using a tracking number to mail letters. Do not be foolish. Anytime you rent a property or you leave a property, make sure you get a full-scale video with a witness. That way the condition of the apartment is relevant and you have proof. Moving on from there, assuming the closed waiting list prevents portability. In other words, they've run all their dollars already, and again, it goes back to budget. Confusing and not absorbing with not accepting. So sometimes it's called wordplay. The housing authority will mislead you in the way it talks to you, having you believe one thing when in materially it's different. Just because they're not absorbing doesn't mean, as it says there, they're not accepting. So you got to watch out. Not everything will reveal itself at the beginning. Relying on verbal instructions from either PHA. Do not ever do that. Phone conversations are worthless and cannot be proven, and that's where you get in a lot of trouble. You got a lot of caseworkers that have been just hired, haven't even read policy, procedure, or administrative plan to tell you all kinds of shit on the phone. But I dare you to ask them to put that in an email or send you a letter stating it. You'll get a whole different story. Watch your ass. All right, for the rest of this information, I'm going to put up the program warnings and so forth in the notes in the description and the comments section. Look, the best advice I can give you guys, dollars well spent, before you go out there and strike on your own to get out here in the country and try to pour it and do billing and absorbing, it might be important to speak with a consultant that's been through this thousands of times with clients. There's as many ways to go wrong as there is right. And just because you have a mechanical guide to federal rules does not mean you'll be successful. But I don't want to spook you into not initiating this process. I just don't want you to learn the hard way. Okay. I've enjoyed making this video, and we'll see you again. Typically, we have live videos on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Central. We also have them on Thursdays, 10 a.m. Central, and Sundays. The rest of the videos I push out in the channel are going to be pre-records and typically in the evenings and afternoons. All right. It's been a pleasure, and have a great day.